So if you remember, we studied before Pesach, before we did the halachot of Pesach, we mentioned an interesting halakha which Maran says clearer in Yored De'ah, which is, if there's a host, and this host is normally particular not to eat pachel goyim, bread that was baked by goyim, and he has a guest, and this guest is not particular, and he prefers the bread that is pachel goyim, the host should make hamotzi on the bread that he normally wouldn't eat. And Maran is now following up with that halakha. And I said there that those of you who are into researching halachot, I wish that someone would research consistently where else Maran says such things. Where else you find that someone lowers their standards, so to speak, for a guest, or vice versa. It would be an interesting conversation to have in general with the world that we're in. Of, do I eat at people's houses? Do I not eat at people's houses? What are standards of halakha, standards of kashrut? And for the researchers among you, I'm eagerly awaiting your research. Pat goyim nikia. Clean, refined bread, but it's pat shel goyim. It was baked by goyim. Upat kevar she'Yisrael, and lower quality bread that was from a Jew. Im eno nizhar mipat goyim, mevarech al eze mehem shirtze. If this person, we're not talking about a host and a guest. Now we're just talking about a person at his own table. He has 2 loaves of bread. If he's not particular about the bread of goyim, mevarech al eze mehem shirtze, he can make a hamotzi blessing on any one of the breads he wishes to bless on. Why? Presumably because each one of them has a ma'ala, has something better. One is that it's a better flour, even though it's baked by goyim. The other one is, though it's not such a great flour, but it's baked by Yehudim. V'im hu nizhar mipat goyim, and if he's careful that he normally doesn't eat pat shel goyim, misalek pat naki shel goyim al shulchan ad lachar berkat hamotzi. He should take the better bread of the goyim off the table until he finishes making a hamotzi. So, on page 418. Do you mind closing that door? I just can't deal with the... And maybe you'll put on the air conditioning. That's okay. Thank you. קודם שנבאר דין סדר הקדימה בפת ישראל ופת גויים. He writes, before we explain the halachot of preference between Jewish bread, קודם שנבאר דין סדר הקדימה בפת ישראל ופת גויים, יש להקדים כי חכמים אסור לאכול מפת שאפה על גויים. My difference, I can't deal with apologetic halachas. I'm going to explain to you my own understanding of pat shel goyim, and you do with it what you want. Maran is Siman Kuf Yud Bet in Yored De'ah. Maran discusses the halachot of buying bread from goyim. And it's a very unusual section of halakha from Maran. It's all based off of a Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah. The Lameds, maybe Lamed Vav, Lamed Zayin. Maran is not clear, or not very clear, as to what the halakha is. It seems these halachot are very subjective and not very objective. When I sat and studied Kuf Yud Bet, both by Rav Peretz, and then later with my Talmidim, it was very clear to us that this whole area of halakha is very up in the air. And the truth is that different chachamim took these decrees very differently. In order to explain how this works, I have to explain that there's a difference between baked products and cooked products. Everything that I am going to say tonight has nothing to do with food that is cooked. I'm not talking about rice, I'm not talking about vegetables, I'm not talking about fish or chicken or meat, I'm talking about bread. Bread, you want to add some cookies and cakes in there, maybe crackers, fine. Bread. Let's speak about bread. So, baked products have a different status than cooked products. Chachamim prohibited eating bread that was baked by goyim. There are two reasons among the Rishonim given for this. The first, Rashi mentions, this is a prohibition of kashrut. What's kashrut? You don't know what's going to happen over there with the food. Maybe you can't buy bread from goyim because they have not kosher ingredients in there. Every conversation we have surrounding Pachal Goyim is working under the assumption the ingredients of the bread are kasher. If the ingredients are not kasher, then it doesn't help us to have a conversation about whether or not a non-Jew could bake bread for us or not. By the way, it's fascinating for me that a Shulchan Aruch, which is full of chapters on how you buy this from non-Jews, how you buy this kind of food from Goyim, baked food, honey, cooked food, processed food, make it sound like until 20 years ago, everybody ate raw food. And all of a sudden, 20 years ago, when the kosher agencies all woke up, that's when people started processing food. We have entire chapters of halakha. How do you drink wine with goyim? Can you? Beer with goyim? Bread from goyim? Honey from goyim? Cooked in the pots of goyim? So on and so on. You buy things in the market that are made by the goyim. Vinegar in barrels of goyim. Vinegar in barrels of goyim? What about the Rama? The Rama mentions over there, in Kuf Yud Dalet, Maran says vinegar that comes in barrels. And the barrels are, I don't know why you would do this. I'm assuming it's a method of insulation. The barrels' walls are coated with lard, with pig fat. Says the Rama, it's permissible to buy the vinegar from them. And you're going to scream about the factory, maybe there was something, you don't even know there was. People don't know halakha. Because they don't know halakha, two things happen. They let people take advantage of them. So it leaves a void for all kinds of ignoramuses to teach halakha. But worse than ignoramuses who teach halakha are the ignoramuses who believe the ignoramuses who teach halakha. That's the worst part. The worst part, I saw a conversation now. I'll tell you, I'm part of all kinds of kosher groups. I saw now a conversation, there was a store. They started bringing jicama slices. You know what a jicama is? For those of you on the East Coast who may not be familiar with our California food over here, jicama is a vegetable. It's a root vegetable. It's a fresh. You slice it up. It looks brown on the outside. It's white on the inside. Maybe I could tell you it has the consistency of an apple, but it has the flavor of a cucumber. It's not sweet or salt. It's just a very plain vegetable. You normally put chili on it or lemon juice and paprika, whatever you want to put, all kinds of spices, and you eat the jicama like that. So somebody came up with jicama slices. A machine cuts jicama. Now, we used to seeing the jicama sticks, but now they started making these round, paper-thin jicama tortillas, they call them. Why would you make a tortilla out of a jicama? Because all kinds of people are gluten-free, whatever it is. You want to crunch, but you don't want to eat that. Okay, whatever. They made such an invention. Essentially what they do, they take the jicama, they peel it all around, and they have a machine that makes paper-thin slices of jicama. You should see the people going crazy. Is it kosher? Can we eat it? Does it have a hechsher? Did you call this agency? Did you call that agency? Well, this agency said yes. This one said no. This one... What are y'all arguing about? A sliced vegetable? Yeah, is a potato kasher? What's the conversation? Now, you're looking at otherwise intelligent people who have brains. You click on their names, at least on Facebook. You never know what people make up on Facebook. This one says they're a doctor. This one is an engineer. This one is a lawyer. This one is a teacher. This one is everyone has a profession. Meaning they spent some years going to school and getting diplomas in something. But when it comes to kashrut, my 5-year-old knows more halakha than they know. Even my 5-year-old knows. Al-Khanan should live and be well. You ask him, what makes something kasher? He'll tell you. Either you look for the fact that it has a kosher symbol on it, or you wait until you ask Abba or Ima, and they'll tell you if it's kasher. So. And what about animals? You ask him. Animals have simanim. Fish have fins and scales. Cows have this kind. You talk tulmot and masot, whatever you want. Those are halachot. Your kid needs to know. But the jicama slice, maybe it's not kasher. You should say, wow, this one told us it's kasher. There's like a sigh of relief in the room. You're asking people if a vegetable sliced in a machine is kasher? Because you don't know what else they make in that machine. What do you think the hikama slicing machine cuts? The hikama slicing machine, what do you think? It makes now pancakes also? It makes lamb chops? What is the hikama slicing machine going to do? Every year when they come out with the Pesach guides, they tell you, you can't buy frozen vegetables made in the same factory, the machine that makes your food is highly optimized. It's specified for the thing that it does. You don't have a machine that makes chocolate chips on the weekends, and then during the week it also makes bologna sandwiches. It doesn't work that way. The machine doesn't work that way. You're worried about cross-contamination? Well, Baruch Hashem, we have a Shulchan Aruch full of halachot of cross-contamination. In order for there to be a problem of cross-contamination halacha, there has to be a problem of cross-contamination. You can't imagine that maybe there will be a problem of cross-contamination. In halacha, your maybe there will be doesn't do anything aside from that. Makes you crazy. But it doesn't actually create a safek, some kind of doubt in halakha. Thank God for a legal system that is codified. We have a law. What does law mean? Law means that no matter what your rabbi says, or my rabbi says, or his or her rabbi says, halakha is halakha. Law is law. Get pulled over by an officer. You're doing 120 miles an hour on the freeway. Well, my rabbi told us that according to his understanding of halakha, it's okay. Who's your rabbi? Does he sit on the Supreme Court? Was he President of the United States? Who is he? He's changing the laws on the freeway. There's a freeway. There's a way in which we observe halachot. Nobody has the right to show up now and start meddling with it. So one, the assumption of bread of goyim is that the bread is kasher. If the bread is not kasher, there's nothing to talk about. Interestingly, in Kuf Yud Bet, Rama has a note. I haven't had time in my life to sit down and research it properly. What does it mean? What are the ramifications of it? Rama says that if in the poles, they have these wooden poles, they put the breads in the oven and they take them out, they put them in. If they smear pig fat on those poles, then, or on the shelves where they put the food in the oven, the minhag is not to eat those cookies. It's a custom in Ashkenaz not to eat those cookies or those cakes. If the poles are smeared with pig fat, it's a custom not to eat them. So let's just say that people should start studying the laws of kashrut. So now what's left in the problem of buying bread from goyim is what we call isur mishum chitun. Our rabbis are afraid that becoming close with people will lead us to intermarry. And intermarriage directly threatens the survival of Am Yisrael. And therefore our rabbis took these halachot very seriously. For those who think these halachot are outdated, if anything, in this generation which intermarries the most, probably we have this problem the most. What does it mean, intermarriage? What does baking a cake have to do with intermarriage? You move into a new house. It's an American tradition, especially if you live in a place where this is what they still do. They still know their neighbors. And my wife is from New York, so 2 buildings or 3 buildings away from her, she doesn't even know people's names anymore. You're lucky if she knows who the next door neighbor is. There are 100 families in a building, how do you know who's who? So in San Diego, you kind of know the 3 neighbors in that direction and the 2.5 neighbors over there, and you recognize people's faces, you wave at them. All kinds of people who wave at me in the grocery store. You're my neighbor. Oh, shalom aleichem. Nice to see you. They recognize my van. I don't recognize their van because it's inconspicuous. You move to a neighborhood. Your neighbor comes over and says, "Hi, this is Mary and Bill, and we came to bring you Mary's aunt's famous brownie recipe. Welcome to the neighborhood." Are you allowed to eat those brownies? Turns out Mary's brownie recipe is Duncan Hines brownies just mixed and put in the oven. Her aunt was Duncan Hines. I don't know what her aunt was. It was in a glass Pyrex dish in an oven that was never used before because these people never eat food in their house. They only take takeout food and bake Duncan Hines cookies and cakes in their oven. Is the cake kasher? The answer is no. It's not kasher. Mishum chitun. Because this is a rabbinic prohibition to avoid our children and Mary's children from marrying each other. So the question now is, what about pressing situations? What about situations where there is no baked bread that comes from a Jewish source? Or maybe the Maran mentions Jewish bread that is of inferior quality to that of the other bakeries. Or just very simply, the logic goes that commercially baked bread, pat nachtom, a bread of a baker, that bread, he doesn't bake bread because he loves you. You go to the grocery store, they didn't bake bread because they know you, they care about you, they want to marry your kids, they even know who you are. You go to the baker, you buy bread, that's his business. He didn't bake cakes or bread for you because you're special, because he loves you, he doesn't know your name. So in that situation, there are many communities. What do I mean many communities? Maran says in communities where they permit. Communities they permit, all of them. All of Am Yisrael. All of Am Yisrael ate bread of Goyim. All of them. A few exceptions of the Mekubalim here, and all of them had a minhag to eat bread from Goyim. Harav Peretz once told us that anybody who doesn't eat bread of Goyim is motzi laz, is denigrating the generations that came before him. All of a sudden now, in 2020, you're more religious than your great-grandparents? What makes you so special? All of Am Yisrael buys bread from Goyim, period. Now there are things you have to worry about in bread. We mentioned before, dairy bread is not kasher. Meat bread is not kasher. Even if it's kosher dairy, kosher meat, bread has to be parve. That's a halakha, Maran writes in Yoreda as well. You want to make sure there's no pig lard on it. We got it, the ingredients. What else makes a bread kasher? The fact that it's baked in a commercial setting and not in a residential setting. So now we're talking about bread that obviously came not from a residential next door neighbor brings you brownies. Thank you very much. We appreciate it so much. And then you pass it on to a friend who's not Jewish, or you bring it to work for your coworkers or whatever you'd like, but it's not for you to eat in your home. Bread, Maran deals with different cases. What about bread that started off in someone's house but was baked in a bakery? You know, she makes her bread in the bakery at home, and she brings the dough to the bakery and bakes it at the farmer's market over there. What about that? What about the other way around? What about dough you buy at the bakery but you bake it in your house? I'm not dealing with complicated situations. Simple situations. Residential bread, asur. Commercial bread, mutar. That's a halakha. So with that set of assumptions, we're now in Yud Aleph on page 418. Heviu lefanav pat Yisrael upat shenachtom goy. They brought before him bread of a Jewish person, meaning pat Yisrael. I'm going to use that phrase. O pat shenachtom goy, or commercial bread of a goy. V'hayeta pat shenachtom hagoy asuya mikemach naki. And the bread of the non-Jew was made with good flour, superior flour, clean flour. V'apat shel Yisrael hayta asuya mikemach sheno naki. And the opposite is true about the Jewish bread. Mevarech al ezo mihen shirtzeh. He could bless on any one of them that he wishes. Yesh omrim, v'im shnei bnei adam ochlim biyachad, and if two people are eating together, yesh omrim shivarech echad al pat Yisrael, v'asher al pat hagoy, v'yesh cholkim. Not for me. 419. Avalim hayu shtehen shavot, but if both breads were equal in quality, mevarech al pat shel Yisrael, he should make a blessing on the bread of the Yisrael. ואף כשהייתה הפת של הנחתום הגוי עשויה מקמח נקי והבת של ישראל עשויה מקמח שאינו נקי, אין להקל לבצוע ולברך על הפת של הנחתום הגוי, אלא למי שאינו נזהר שהוא לאכול פת של הנחתום גוי. אבל אם הוא רגיל תמיד להיזהר שהוא לאכול פת של הנחתום גוי, יסלק הפת של הגוי מעל השולחן עד אחר ברכת המוציא. He says essentially what Maran said, that this is all about a person who's not particular, so he has the option to eat bread of goyim. But somebody who the whole year doesn't eat bread of goyim and now is in this kind of situation, what should he do? He should take the bread of the goyim off the table, because it's better than the Jewish bread, and make a hamotzi on the Jewish bread, eliminating the option, and therefore choosing to make bread a hamotzi on the blessing that he should make. On page 421 at the top, ואם בעל הבית אינו נזהר מפת גויים, ואין דעתו לאכול כל הסעודה רק פת גויים כי היא נקייה. If the host is not particular, he eats bread of goyim, and his intention is to only eat bread of goyim the whole meal. אבל בני ביתו אוכלים מפת שאינו נקי של ישראל. But his children, the people in his house, his wife, whoever it is, they prefer to eat from the Jewish bread that is not as high quality. ושתי הלחם מונחים על השולחן, and both loaves of bread are in front of him. צריך לבצוע על פת נקייה של גויים, הואיל והוא הבוצע, ואין דעתו לאכול אלא מאותו הפת. He should make a hamotzi on the bread of goyim. Says Maran, he should. That's what he should do. Why? Because that's the bread he's intending to eat. He has to do what he is going to eat. He has to make hamotzi on the bread that he wants to eat. V'im baal habayit nizhar mipat goyim, v'Yisrael shelo nizhar bekach mesev imo al hashulchan. And if the host is careful of bread of goyim, and there's a Jewish guest of his who's at his home, and he's not careful about it, kevan de mitzvah muteret al baal habayit yivtzah min hayafa shel hagoyim. Because the mitzvah of hamotzi is on the host, he should make a blessing on the nicer bread of the goyim. V'kevan shehutar lo liftzah, hutar lechol ha'seuda. And this is similar to the conversation we just had in the Rambam. And once it has been permissible for him to do hamotzi on the bread of goyim, it is now permissible for him to eat this bread for the rest of the meal. Not just for hamotzi, until his guest is still at his table. So long as his guest is still at the table, he can eat the bread of goyim the whole meal. Rama adds an important point. V'dafka shechaviv alav oto apat. This is only dafka. This is only when this bread is preferable to him. אבל אם אינו חביב עליו ולא איסור פת של גויים, לא צריך להקדימו. Forget the pet shel goyim. If he doesn't like the bread that the guest wants, he doesn't have to make hamotzi on it. It will be like the second case. Here you're talking about a case where he likes the bread of the goyim, and therefore he should make a hamotzi on that bread. The notes here are not as important to us. Let's look here on page 423, under the two lines. Here we have an interesting teaching that is based mostly off of the Mishnah Berurah. They want to take this from the Shach and Yoredah, which we mentioned in Kuf Yud Bet, but it's explicitly here in the Mishnah Berurah. So let's look on page 423, under the two lines. V'afilu ksheyesh hamoreach, even when he has a guest, לא התירו לבעל הבית לאכול מפת של גוי, אף על פי שתמיד נזהר מכך, אלא רק שמברך על הפת ופותר את האורח בברכתו, ובוצע מן הפת ונותן לו. The only situation where we allow a host to do this, where he makes a hamotzi blessing on bread that he normally wouldn't eat out of respect to his guest, is in a situation where he's the one who makes a hamotzi for himself and for his guest, and he gives from his guest to eat from the bread. But if you're in a situation where everyone has a roll on their plate and everyone makes their own hamotzi, and the host should make a hamotzi on the bread that he would normally eat, which is the pat shel Israel, and the guest should make a hamotzi on the bread that he likes to eat, which is the pat shel goyim, and the host doesn't have to feel compelled to make a hamotzi on his bread because he's not going to be making a bracha for him anyways. And it will be more similar than to a case where the host is just sitting at home alone, and he now has a choice between bread he's allowed to eat and bread he chooses not to allow himself to eat. B'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow we're going to be dealing with the halachot of pat haba b'kisanin, or pat haba b'kisnin, they call it. This bread we've discussed many months ago, because we dealt with a different halakha earlier in Shulchan Aruch, and we came here and we skimmed through this. It's going to be important to understand that this area of halakha is a little bit gray, and there's a lot to be discussed about it, and we're going to have to jump around a little bit in the Shulchan Aruch tomorrow in order to understand what on earth are we even talking about. So we really are up to page 423, but tomorrow we're going to be doing page 433 first in order to understand even what Maran is saying on page 423. That's going to lead us into a famous discussion about what the blessing on matzah is throughout the year. So we know matzah is hamotzi on Pesach, but there's obviously, you may be familiar with whether matzah changes its blessing throughout the year or not. We'll have the conversation, God willing, in the coming weeks. I'd like to ask for those who are still with us to join me as we say some tefillot for Yom HaZikaron.